So thank you all today for joining us for this community's host home learning session. We host homes have been a community conversation for a number of years, identified in the ACI under 18 work group and approved in our coordinated community plan. Two RFPs have been released and haven't received any applications or responses yet to those RFPs. And so just wanted to have some time and some space to really talk about what host homes are, why host homes are, important in our community, and also kind of next steps with re-releasing a new RFP. So just a little bit of a next agenda for today's meeting. But first, I want to go ahead and start with the people's acknowledgement that Finn will read.
Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes for a better life. And some have lived on this land since its immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. So we begin this meeting acknowledging that we are on the ancestral lands of the numerous tribes who are connected through a shared history of trade, celebration, and resources in the Spokane area. We make this acknowledgement to pay respects to their elders past and present whose knowledge remains on the land. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in continuing to learn about such truths and actions we can take towards restorative justice.
Thank you, Finn. So first, we just kind of wanted to set some context of why we are talking about host homes, why we keep having this conversation. And so I think the first part is that this was identified in our coordinated community plan as a community priority. And it was identified as a community priority because it helps reach some of the goals outlined in our coordinated community plan. So it helps eliminate disproportionality in youth homelessness because the host home program should be committed to addressing racial and LGBTQ plus equity through a racial data lens, regularly evaluating program and community level data to identify weak spots. Host home programs will be part of the Y2Y case conferencing and building the prioritization list. And part of internal case management meetings and really focusing on QT BIPOC populations and youth that hold one or more of those identities. So we're really hoping that host homes will be another resource to help eliminate the disproportionality in youth homelessness, knowing that QT BIPOC youth are overrepresented in our youth homelessness crisis system. Second, it helps achieve functional zero for youth homelessness because it is a new and different resource to help provide services, housing, resources to intersecting marginalized identities to support their immediate needs and get them connected with services. Next is achieving the ACI gold standard in centering youth voice. The YAB and youth in our community have really spoken about this as a need that they see as a resource that would be helpful in either their experience in the past or currently as they're experiencing homelessness. Host home programs should also be working closely with the YAB, the Youth Advisory Board, in developing and creating what a host home program would look like. So making sure that the youth voice is centered and driving the conversation when it comes to host homes. And finally, youth are supported as whole humans in the youth homelessness system. Host homes really give that opportunity for youth experiencing homelessness to be in a home-like setting where their medical needs, their educational needs, their health, both physical and mental or behavioral needs, are all being met, and being part of the community, building that positive support system so they can live and thrive as they're transitioning to that young adult phase of their life. So that, this resource is one that was really identified to help meet those 4 goals that were agreed upon in our coordinated community plan. The second is that host homes can really fit the needs of special populations identified by HUD in the YHDP program that are uniquely vulnerable to homelessness. So really looking at targeting youth under 18, BIPOC youth, trans or non-binary youth, LGBTQ youth, justice-involved youth, or youth that have been sexually exploited or commercially sexually exploited. So really, looking at some of these smaller populations that would really benefit from a home-based environment to help them receive the services and supports that they need, but are also not currently being served by the child welfare systems. So with YHDP and all of the projects that we're doing, we really want to look at prioritizing youth and young adults that are most vulnerable to youth homelessness, and Hope's Homes is a new way for our community to do so. And that this was an additional resource for youth identified in the coordinated community plan, that a lot of the community conversations were around needing more resources for under 18 youth. So youth can be referred into host homes by the by name list or case conferencing, school personnel. We've heard it from community organizations and work groups and the YAB itself of why we need something like host homes in our community with the new funding coming from YHDP. So that is a little bit of the why we're talking about it and continue to talk about it. Any questions or thoughts on why we're talking about host homes? Okay. So second is we just really wanted to open up for a little bit of community conversation to talk about why host homes may have helped in the past or may serve some populations now in our community. And so Finn and Heather, we're going to just kind of discuss a little bit of their perspectives on host homes. So Finn or Heather, I don't know which one of you might want to start.
I'm happy to. From our perspective at the shelter, with the youth rooms that we have, it's really hard if they're under 18 to find somewhere for them to go, and we have a limited amount of time that they can stay there. So I think that host homes would be a really great resource for us to be able to have either at the shelter or to have homes that we could get these youth placed in when their time's up in the rooms that we have. Because there's just, if they're under 18, and even the ones that are 18, it's hard enough to place, but if they're under 18, there's nowhere for us to send them to unless it's back to family, and we know that a lot of times that's just not something that's going to work.
And do you want to talk about some of the special beds that you have, Heather, that might be?
Sure. So at St. Margaret's, we currently have a room through youth probation, through juvenile justice, that we have. Those rooms are 16 to 18-year-olds. 18, if they're still on probation, they can serve out their probation through St. Margaret's at 18. A lot of times with that, we're trying to get them housed instead. But the 16 and 17-year-olds, we can't get housed. We've also had a CSEC room for survivors and victims of trafficking that was for 16 to 24-year-olds, but most of the time, the people that were in there were 16 to 18. And so both of those rooms have typically been fairly hard to get them into housing. We've been successful with the 18-year-olds, but under that, you know, if they're under 18, it's pretty tough. We work to find family members or other resources in the community that they can go to.
Thank you. Any questions for Heather or thoughts on what Heather shared?
I think just to kind of echo what Heather was saying, you know, through the Anchor Community Initiative conversations, you know, we've had, I started facilitating case conferencing with direct service providers back in January of 2020. And so over these like nearly 3 years now, there have been a handful of minor youth and other shelter programs as well. You know, we also in our community have the Crosswalk Shelter and the CRC and Hope Beds at YFA, and have heard time and again from shelter providers, some of whom are in this space right now. So not to speak for you, but there were a number of young people, particularly, I think what we saw through our case conferencing prioritization were like trans and gender diverse identified young people where, you know, they're unable to return back home due to the violence, either physical, emotional, or all of the above. And yet didn't, and so a lot of times in that same sort of instance were cut off from a lot of their natural resources they developed through, since many of those were through their families, given their you know, their age particularly. And so ended up, yeah, like living in the shelter system for extended periods of time. And I think that's something that the ACI has been interested in ensuring that we bring a resource here that can serve, yeah, those folks that are under 18, you know, whatever. I mean, it's not unknown that the housing needs of folks who can't legally sign a lease without going through the emancipation process and all the other things, as well as other dependency laws and things, restrict their ability to seek housing sources in this similar kind of way. And so, yeah, we've been talking about how we could try to test or pilot or run some sort of a host home type program for a long time. And I think through the Youth Centralized Diversion Fund, we've been able to do that to an extent, but pretty minimally and without a lot of the intentional support that not only comes for the young person, but also for the family that is serving as, you know, maybe that's hosting those young folks in their home, and not necessarily able to give them the same degree of like care and attention that that this project could offer.
In Finn, did you want to share?
Yeah, does Rebecca have a question first, though? I don't want to talk before that. And Jolie.
Well, I thank you, Finn. I don't have a question as much as, and Julius, my apologies for not responding to you earlier in your email, but I just want to echo some of the things in terms from the shelter perspective. Is I'm from the CRC, and after, you know, we've had youth in our shelter for over 200 days, and that's just not healthy for them. They do start to decompensate after about 30 days. We start to see their mental health start to decline, their well-being, and for all the reasons that that Julius just mentioned. You know, they don't have their natural supports around them. They're trying to figure out and manage 15 different, you know, parental figures at any given time, given the staff that are in and out. You know, and there's no way to really nurture them in the way that they need and or deserve in those ages, given the trauma that they've been through. So I think, you know, host homes would be a terrific way to kind of, you know, transition them out of the shelter, back into their own communities, back into their school environments, and back into their their social and emotional supports. And I would say this is especially true for the LGBTQ community, who may not have the opportunity to go home or go back to family of any kind at all. And I've been hearing that more and more in the different circles that, that we've been working with. They start to decompensate over a period of time in the shelter, but really have no other choices. There's no CHINS placements. There's no families out there, no family member reaching out to them. And so I think a host home would be a great alternative. Thank you, Finn, for letting me share that. And then
And then I see Jolie has her hand up.
I do. Thank you, Finn. So I'm going to kind of go piggyback off of what Julius and Rebecca are saying as well. Our organization would be super excited about having the host home program. Initially providing the shelters that extra support and the wraparound services to finding kind of that match made host home for them. And as Rebecca was saying too, kind of seeing the mental health decline and certain aspects of being there too long, or just different trauma and stuff that they've gone through. So the host homes, what I'm trying to get at, the host homes would be an amazing program for Spokane, but also engaging with the services with the shelters. And as Julius mentioned too, with the diversion, we submit them several times weekly, but there's only so much that it can do. So just having that extra support as a program would be awesome. So thank you.
So yeah, I was just gonna share from my personal experience. I was a minor couch surfing, and I definitely feel like host homes would be very beneficial for the community, especially for unaccompanied minors. And in my experience with couch surfing, I think if there had been stuff like case management or funds to support the people housing me, there would definitely, in my opinion, be way less tension between us, and that would have achieved more stable housing for me. But also, I had been in situations where I was staying with people who were abusing me, and then I feel like that could have been avoided with hosts that volunteer and are matched with clients and stuff. But also, obviously, have it, monitored and regulated to a sense, because I have been in informal host home programs that were specifically for the LGBT community, and not to like Trump, but like there was abuse there. So like having informal host homes is in my experience has had harmful outcomes at times. So having it formally would just, I think, really be an awesome resource for minors. And also, I know it's not called this anymore. I can't remember the name for it now, but like wet versus dry housing. I don't know if like host homes would be considered like wet housing for minors, but I think that is also kind of an important aspect as a minor who was like smoking weed for pain and stuff like that, like just kind of stuff like that. Maybe I don't know how it's all going to work, but if there's like flexibility in that, I think that that's an interesting opportunity to add more flexibility and less barriers for this. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Finn, for sharing that. Any questions or other thoughts from other providers in the community, or questions for Heather or Jolie or Finn or Rebecca? Or any ideas of where you think this could plug into as you're thinking through your caseloads of where host home might really be a solution that is needed in your day-to-day work? Okay, so one thing wanted to cover is just there's a lot of resources out there on what host homes can look like and best practices for host homes. One of them is Host Homes for Youth and Young Adults, a Washington State best practice manual. And looking through that, they had 6 key elements for host home program success. So this is just a high level overview of program philosophy and commitments, and really to ensure a successful host home program from the beginning, and just some of the core values that programs should be thinking about as they develop or set something up. So the first, protection, I think this is, a key piece and really important, is just creating safe homes for youth. We are talking about minors, and so really thinking through how are minors going to be kept safe in these situations. And so the idea of protection, so establishing and implementing vetting processes for host homes, consistent home safety checks, ensuring confidentiality for both the host homes and the youth that are living inside the host homes, and making sure that providers are aware of insurance requirements. So there is the RCW that governs host homes, which does require insurance, but then also thinking about homeowners insurance or rental insurance, and then liability insurance for the program and staff. So just that is a key component of any program that is successful, is just making sure that the program will be safe. Second is the education. So the youth are being supported and enrolled in school or training or vocational programs, and really supporting the educational outcomes of the youth, but also providing host with education, basic and specialized trainings to make sure that they are supporting youth in a very safe and appropriate, but also nurturing way. So at the bare minimum, that you or hosts are informed and trained in trauma-informed care, positive youth development, cultural responsiveness, and specifically any health or behavioral needs that the youth might have. So the hosts really need to be equipped in order to meet the needs of the youth in their home. Second is providing that immediate and ongoing support and on education and training for hosts, including a 24/7 crisis support line for hosts if they need to reach out to get some support immediately for the youth that they're supporting in their home. Next is the inspiration. Is a lot of the youth that would be placed into host homes have had trauma. They've had ran into a lot of roadblocks, and so being a place that can inspire them for those next steps in thriving and reaching their full potential in life. So we really want to empower youth to their full potential, to see what that might look like, supporting and engaging youth, develop the support system, working with youth so they can drive development of short-term goals, and empowering youth to share their stories in a safe and affirming way. So host and the program really need to be working with youth to help them see their life where it can be, and helping them make those connections to reaching those next steps. Communication. So open, transparent communication between the program and host, and the program and the youth being served, but also ensuring that there's good, healthy communication between the host and the youth inside the home. So the program really taking a proactive approach in meeting with the youth a few times before they try to match with a host home, or talking with the youth in any kind of supports, kinship that youth might have. Having regular check-ins with both the youth and the host home. So that might be, daily at the beginning, and then weekly, and then monthly, but just knowing that the communication is open and ongoing between the parties. And to make sure that any kind of issues that crop up between the host and the youth can be communicated and dealt with the support by the program and the case management. Commitment that homes in the program, supporting these host homes, are committed to the youth and to the host homes. So making sure and guaranteeing that youth have access to any kind of medical care, identification, food, public benefits they might be entitled to, school supplies, school programs, clothes, hygiene. So when the youth are in the host homes, they don't have to worry about how their basic needs are going to be met. They really can focus on thriving and reaching their goals, either in jobs or school. But the program and the home should be committed to meeting the needs of the youth that are with them. And then finally, celebration, really ensuring that when goals are met, that there's rewards, that we're celebrating. If something happens bad for the youth, like if a family member dies or someone close to them, there's a tragedy, that they also have the space and support through those instances as well, so they can feel like they are secure and can be stable in their with the host home. So those are just, I thought, were important, some things to think about as you're thinking about setting up a program, to make sure that it's successful from the beginning with some of these key components. But also, as we've talked about the RFPs that have been released in the past, really thinking through what the Spokane community has decided as some key components for host homes in our community, and what that might look like. And so some of the practices that were identified by the YHTP core team and have come out of the ACI work groups are the support to youth, identifying and supporting host, formal partnerships, and addressing disproportionality. So really looking at how youth will be supported through financial support, case management, connections to the community, and then as well as supporting the host with recruitment and retention, financial support, making sure that the resources that can help support them with the youth, they're connected to those community resources, and have that ongoing training and support from the program and staff. Formal partnerships between a program and QT BIPOC organizations, the schools, juvenile justice, behavioral health partners, and the homelessness crisis response system, since we know that there is a need, and especially schools and some of community organizations and networks that youth are already attached to, they will know the youth that might benefit best from a host home support, and can help support those youth ongoing. And then finally, addressing disproportionality, that at least 60% of youth served in a host home program should hold one or more QT BIPOC identities, since we do see in the by name list data and some of the other school data that QT BIPOC youth are disproportionately impacted by homelessness. So on the section of kind of the host homes in practice and some of those overarching principles, is there any questions or feedback from anyone? Any areas that you'd like to discuss? Okay. So next are just a little bit other things to think about is, there are legal requirements, RCW. Oh, Rebecca, did you have a question?
I'm sorry. I was messing around. I couldn't find my microphone and all of my things there to do this. So can we go back to that last slide for a minute? So I think all of these things are, yes, this is what it should do in practice. I have a couple of questions though, and I don't, maybe you're going to get to these later, and if so, I can just wait and hold on. But one is that that at least 60% of the youth served in host homes should hold one or more of the QT BIPOC identities. I'm given Spokane, is that a realistic percentage?
Yeah, so speaking to this, through our by name list, on a month-to-month basis, our, sort of general average number of young people of color who present in our active population is approximately 40%. We don't have super fantastic, like across the entire system, data for sexual orientation, but a lot of the projects who serve strictly youth and young adults, particularly those funded through OHY or RHY, collect that data universally. And in those projects, they see usually closer to like 70-75% of their young people in their programs hold a LGBTQ plus sexual orientation identity. So honestly, I feel like 60% would be like the easiest metric that we could possibly shoot for. We kind of discussed as a small group more recently, those of us who are part of the YHDP core team and engaging in some of those conversations, like what this could look like, and wanting to be a little bit more prescriptive on how the project should function and who should be served. Going back to like that recognition that in the earliest conversations through the ACI on why we would want or need host homes, identifying trans and gender diverse young people as like a real obvious need. We wanted to make sure that we spoke to that a little bit more clearly than we had in the first two RFPs, but 60% should be a absolute like slam dunk, like a real easy metric to meet.
And then would this include the surrounding some of the surrounding rural areas like Deer Park, Airway Heights, and that would all be included in the scope of the service area?
Yeah, so the project is through the Spokane City and County COC. So it would be the same geographic location. So anyone within Spokane County.
Okay. And then my final question, and maybe this is the one you'll get to later, is about in the past, the RFP has, I forget the dollar amount, but it wasn't very much to encompass all of this scope of practice. Is that going to change, or are we going to have that discussion?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we are also exploring. I more recently, was that last week? 2 weeks ago, about a little over a week ago, I had a conversation with the resource development director at United Way about how we could try to secure matching funds. So that's actually up here on this slide, right there in the middle on the budget. So currently, the federal funds allocated for this project are $154,000 over a 2-year period. And so having spoken with her about strategies and ideas on what local philanthropic resources we could potentially reach out to meet this need, this is also speaking a bit to your first question, Rebecca, around identifying specifically like a minimum percentage for QT BIPOC young people in our community who'd be served. There are entities in our community who are putting out an incredible amount of money to meet DEI needs and address disproportionality for underserved populations in our community. And so we want to make sure. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason why we made sure to include that, not only to set an expectation for community members who might be interested in picking this project up, but also to be able to speak specifically to potential funders who have a heart for this kind of work, that we might be able to secure some matching funds for this. Melissa and I actually are meeting tomorrow afternoon to start writing up proposals and whatnot. So we are in the process of seeking additional funding sources that could help flesh this out.
Is there any kind of basis, or like a kind of previous examples where there's a budget carved out for like how much money the homes themselves would be seeking? I mean, we probably at CRC, we probably get at least one, maybe two calls a month from, either a family that is a kid's been couch surfing with and they just can't keep them anymore, for all kinds of different reasons, or from a parent too, and the family that he's been staying with are saying he can't stay there anymore, that kind of thing. And I'm sure that Crosswalk gets their fair share of that as well. And some of that, I can't tell you a percentage or proportion or anything, but some of that is because they just can't financially afford to. They can't continue to feed another youth. They can't, they're, struggling in their own rent or whatever is going on. So I'm just curious about that. If we're still looking at, what would it be, 400,000 over 2 years? What is it that we're looking at in terms of what percentage of that is going to actually go to financially supporting the host home, because they're going to need that. I think that's sometimes a barrier for many.
Yeah. So, and I think that's part of the application process too, right? Is, there certainly are examples, right? So we can look to other communities who are running host home projects and get ideas of what their, what, kind of budgets they're, how they're outlined. We have spoken to some folks out of King County, some folks out of Thurston County. I know that Mason County, which is an incredibly rural area, has a pretty prominent host home project. There's another host home project on Whidbey Island. So there are places where we can look to those things. There's an agency out of New York who has been providing technical assistance and has done a lot of research on host homes and whatnot. And they have like some sample budgets and whatnot. So, and I think ultimately, like, knowing what Spokane looks like at the time and all the things, like, that's also partially going to be, dependent on how many funds are available and what, staffing costs and other sort of financial needs are going to come out of that source. Like, what would be available for stipends and how that money can and should be used. So yes, there are examples, and I think that's something we're also kind of resistant to be too prescriptive of, because we want that to be able to work for the agency that's putting in an application.
I get one of my big concerns is that it's just, even at double 154,000, which is 300,000, not 4. Math, I learned it a long time ago, and it's hard for me to remember it sometimes. Anyway, I just don't know that that's enough money. That's a concern of mine. I'm not speaking on behalf of YFA or CRC by any means, like if this was something we would want to pursue. I'm just thinking as a professional looking at that going, wow, that's not a lot of money. So thank you for listening.
And I have a question. Sorry, this is Jolie. My computer froze up, so now I'm on my phone, unfortunately, but I'm back. So I just wanted to see, it's the 154 for 2 years or per year?
That would be for the 2-year YHTP period. So that started, August 1st. So it would be between now and the end of that YHTP demonstration project timeline. So if it as we get, further away from August 1st, it kind of shrinks that that timeline, but it would be still be the same amount because that's what was reported to HUD.
Okay, and then the matching funds, I know Julius was starting to talk about that before my computer froze up. So can you guys reiterate on that for me a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the process of putting together a proposal so that we can reach out to local philanthropic partners. After speaking to the resource development director at United Way, she feels like there's a really good case here and that it wouldn't be too incredibly difficult to secure some additional funds locally. One other thing that I hadn't added earlier, I know that there are statewide entities that are looking to try to push host home funding in the next legislative session as well. So like there are, of course, that's a big if and probably several ifs into one large if. But, there are agencies who have a lot of pull and sway who are looking to push host home funding, state host home funding here in the next, not too distant future as well. So there are prospects and things on the horizon, nothing right now that is set in stone that we can say, yes, this is a thing that exists right now. But we are certainly something we're continuing to explore as we've heard that feedback. I'm not sure if you were on the call or online at the time, but Rebecca was speaking to the, amount and difficulties that could come with that as well. And so that's something that, those of us who are on the core team have heard loud and clear, and we're beginning to actively exploring what additional options look like. But that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, thank you for that. And then also, I think I kind of read when I was reading over the initial project that we cannot take in any allocated funds from the city, such as like donations and such. Am I wrong about that part? If people were to donate from the community for the host home program, in addition to already what is allocated from that, just like for a backup or whatever the case is.
I am not clear on that, but Ramona and Jen are on. If either of you might be able to answer that question.
I don't see Jen on here, and I am not sure. I'm not clear on where that is located. If I could, get that information and find out where that's written or where that's stated.
Yeah, and I'll try to find it too real quick. I think it was pretty much stating that there's funds cannot be allocated, or any more funds cannot be allocated within outside the program.
I'm sure what that would mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what that would mean is that what was designated for the YHVP funding is what it is, and no more will be allocated based on what HUD has determined is available for the project. So I don't think it has anything to do with donations at all.
The private donations. Okay, because sometimes I just get private donors too that want to donate to the cause and stuff. So I just
that should not affect your funding in any way.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
I know most projects in the community, whether they receive public funding or not, are oftentimes like using different funding sources to support a singular program, so that that project doesn't live or die by a single grant, and are braiding other sources of funding into them. So I can't imagine that would be the case. So yeah, I think what Ramona explained makes a lot of sense though too.
Okay, Gage, and then Shannon.
Hi. So what this is, this would be third try on getting this grant out. And what I've heard so far and what I would agree with is that this is not enough money over a 2-year period. But as Julius was saying, even though it would be, a chance and risky, this would be, the start in my mind. And then we as a team could look for more funding for this. My concerns with not pursuing this as it is now is that, if we don't, the window's going to close on these funds. If we don't get it spent down, it won't come back into the community. And we've all clearly identified, especially Leslie. Hi, Leslie, by the way, great to see you. I mentioned you in a speech the other day. I'll have to send it to you. There are, even in Central Valley School District alone, there are 59 8th through 12th graders experiencing homelessness that would benefit from some of which, if not all, or most, or whatever, could benefit from this. So would this money be enough to start? And then could we make some promises on securing more funding into the future? Because I know that this isn't enough over a 2-year period, but in my mind, it's enough to start. And it would be taking a risk, but it would be for the community.
So one thing I just want to point out that I put in the chat was the Point Source Youth Host Home Handbook, which gives a really great overview of what host homes can look like, and then a lot of the how and why and, forms and, everything that you would need to get a program going, staff. But it also has a year one budget of a sample host home, and they pencil that out to $122,000 for the first year, which would have a coordinator, case manager, stipends. And that's looking at 10 youth housed in 12 months. And what our coordinated community plan was thinking is 10 to 15 youth. So the 154 is, obviously not too much more than that 122, but when we've looked at also some of the other host home projects that have kind of popped up around the state, and when other folks are looking at it around the country, we're not too far off. And I think especially looking into some of those matching funds and philanthropic dollars, it does seem that it can be doable with the YHTP funds. So I know we have Emily and Elaine on, who are technical assistants for YHTP. So that's definitely something that we've been talking with our TA folks, as well as looking at the budget and the financials for this.
I just wanted to say that 10 to 15 youth served is over the 2-year period, not necessarily annually, right? So the expectation that we've set with HUD is that we would serve at least 10 youth over those 2 years, so approximately 5 youth per year. Of course, if we can make it work to serve more young people, then of course we can, but that's sort of like the minimum expectation that we've set with HUD.
And Shannon, did you have a question?
I did. This is just, I posed this question to Julius earlier today. I read in the RCW that it says private homes. And I guess it makes me curious if there's any room for anything like the situation we currently have at St. Margaret's.
And yeah, Julius had asked that earlier. And I don't know if that's something that legislatively, could possibly be a change in the future. So I think, if there is some interest there in exploring that might be something that we'd want to, look at as Away Home Washington is kind of looking at some possible lobbying around host homes in the upcoming legislative sessions.
So with that, I guess I would just follow up and ask, so if we were to respond to the RFP with that as a model, would that, at this juncture, would that be thrown out?
Can you say more about what your model is? This is Emily with the technical assistance through CSH. I'm just not familiar with your housing model.
Yeah, so we're we're a shelter, but we do both emergency shelter and transitional housing programs. And we're specifically for families, but we have set aside several rooms where we have partnerships. Originally, it started with Lutheran Community Services, and we were looking at youth who were had been trafficked or at risk of CSEC. And then that was kind of expanded with juvenile court through a grant that they had with DCYF. And so now we utilize a room for youth who typically they're meeting that at-risk requirement as well, but they're involved with our local juvenile probation. And so they're individual rooms. We provide case management. We have 24/7 on-site staffing. We have a communal kitchen. Everyone has their own bathroom. And then we just, we identify goals and case planning and help them to, identify educationally what they're going to work on while they're there and housing for exit and those sorts of things. It's not necessarily a private home environment, but we are providing on site a lot of the services that have been identified as things that want to, that are pieces of this project.
But so the room is in a shelter or an existing transitional housing facility?
Correct.
Yeah, that wouldn't meet the definition or kind of provision around a host home. That would, again, fall under either emergency shelter or transitional housing funding, but would not meet the criteria for a host home project. Why I'm not on mute, I would offer, so I've also heard loud and clear the money and the budget piece. And I think it's great that Julius has been able to potentially identify some other funding sources. I'll say that there are other like-sized communities who are looking at serving the same amount of youth who have similar budgets to what was put out in YHGP in Spokane. So I think there's also, again, I hear you, if there's more money that folks can put on the table, if you can bring other resources to bear, I think that's great. And I think will help round out the application and the project. But just to also say that it has been done in other communities with about the same amount of funding. There is carve out or resources that are available for the host homes. One of the things with YHGP being a demonstration project, the first year there was actually no money allowed from HUD to go to the household. They now can do anywhere from $500 to $1,000 that the host family can receive a month in stipends to help exactly cover all those costs that you said, hey, this becomes a barrier for families. So helping with food, helping with just the overall household cost of having another person in the household. So there are funds available for that within the budget. I think one of the other budget pieces is really looking at, and this is where some of the other communities have looked, is what are they actually spending on staffed costs, and how are they thinking about the host home project and really thinking about it as a lighter touch intervention, but with the real focus on moving a young person into permanent housing. So I think I don't have the right words on a Monday afternoon. It's not necessarily scaling back the case management, but looking at what is the real intent in a host home project and what's going to get a young person into that permanent housing and being stable. I will say the other thing I heard Gage say is, can't we just start this and try? There are other communities that are in the same place as you that would love to be in a learning community with you all. And as you're building your project, to be able to share what's working, what's not working in different communities. And then we do have, the first 3 rounds of YHGP that have host home programs that are also very willing to share and talk with you all one-on-one about how they've structured their projects, what it actually looks like in practice, successes or barriers that they've had bringing other resources to bear for their host home projects and what that really looks like. So just again, to know that there are tons of resources out there for supporting anybody who applies or anyone who gets the money, that's something we're also here on the technical assistance side to make sure that you have all the right supports in place to be successful.
Yeah, and thank you for that point, Emily. I also put in the chat here just a little bit before Leslie's comments about capacity at CVSD. I included a link so that has sort of like the model and a couple slides ago when Melissa was sharing those 6 major points came from that same manual. So for folks who aren't able to open that or whatever, let me know. And I think between that and the Point Source Youth, we have a couple of really great guides here right now. And then as you know, as Emily just pointed out, there are other YHDP communities across the country. And we have other community partners here in the state, some of whom are also anchor communities. And so we have that built-in relationship. So an incredible amount of support and space for communication. The couple of folks that I've been connecting with over the last couple of years have been very responsive and very open and very excited about hearing, you know, Spokane pushing for this and are more than happy to provide whatever insight that they can, however they can and however that looks. So yeah, we're looking to enter into a very welcoming and supportive community.
And I think another piece is that has come out in a couple conversations that we've had as a smaller group is that some organizations are already doing host homes in an informal kind of sense. So this is a way to help support and kind of formalize some of those relationships. So there are folks on this call that already know kind of how to do it, you know, what it might look like. Because they are doing it for youth and families in the community. But this is just the next step in making those formal partnerships and more formal relationships. The second piece is it's not asking to serve 10 to 15 youth in that first month. It's understood that this might be a new project and there might be some time to get ramped up. So, you know, it's 10 to 15 youth over those 2 years, not day one. So you don't have to go out and recruit 10 homes your first day as the program, but there is some time to build that program and build those relationships. And I think finally the financial piece is I think that's a key part of the support of host homes and recruitment is there's those stipends, but also really being knowledgeable of the community resources out there that families and youth can be connected to. So like Leslie put into the chat, you know, free and reduced lunch, you know, the McKinney-Vento, you know, transportation and, you know, all of those things that could really support a family, having a case manager who can help, you know, a host home navigate all of that and get them connected to the resources to make this, you know, sustainable. And they're not feeling like they have to learn Medicaid and SNAP and, you know, everything and Social Security possibility all at the same time. Like there will be the support and help to do that for the host so it can be feasible. So just some things that I wanted to highlight. But with that, I will go to kind of the next steps of looking at re-releasing an RFP and awarding. So Ramona, did you want to touch on this at all? So what we're thinking is that we will release the RFP and application Friday, October 14th. So an email will be sent out through CHHS and the other avenues to let everyone know that the RFP is on the City Funding Opportunities website. Technical assistance will be available during the application time period, and the application will be at least 3 weeks. So to give folks time to review some of the materials that we've shared, ask questions, you know, learn. Julius and I and other folks part of the YHTP team are happy to connect you with, you know, some of the folks we've talked to outside of the community. If you have specific questions or want to learn more during that 3-week period, let us know, please, and we will, get you connected, and you can ask all of the, good, bad, or indifferent kind of questions that you might have with folks actually doing the work now. After that application process, there will be an evaluation of the COC's RFP subcommittee, which YAB members also sit on, who will review the RFP and make recommendations to the COC. And then the award, the COC will vote on the recommendations. YAB will provide recommendations, and then the final recommendations go through the City of Spokane Council for final award. So that's just a timeline to give kind of an idea of what's coming up. But the next most important date is probably this Friday, when that RFP and application will be re-released. So any questions on next steps? Leslie?
So it's not on next steps. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. I did put something in the chat about under those legal requirements. You said that it was parental authorization was needed. So is there going to be some consideration for when parental authorization is neither safe to get, nor is it nor are we able to get because parents are not accessible?
I think that'll probably be something that we'll have to discuss as a community, because that I just copy and pasted what the law says. And so we definitely have to follow that RCW. I mean, since they are minors and they're not part of the child welfare system, I mean, there has to be permission for, medical care and, all of the things. But that's how the RCW is written on that.
Well, and to also let you know, under McKinney-Vento, under that federal law, unaccompanied homeless youth don't need consent for certain things, including getting signed into school and doing all that. So while it's an state RCW, there's also some federal guidance that that gives us some other avenues. So I want to put that in the parking lot, that needs to be a discussion, because that's exactly why liaisons are given certain roles and duties to be able to navigate those kind of things. So I just want to make sure that discussion isn't detabled. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to, dig into that and look at those things. I expect that the answer we're going to find is that, obviously there's a distinction between accessing school and living in a stranger's home. So just like Crosswalk and CRC, they can't have, we wouldn't want any host family to be accused of harboring a minor, is what Rebecca just put in there, right? So like, and it's state law. So I mean, I agree with you. Like I think it's worth exploring and seeing like what does this look like to try to navigate. But just those are the kind of the distinctions I anticipate that we'll run up against as well.
And I'm thinking it's going to be a case by case. So I don't want us to not put some flexibility in for those case by case things. So anyway.
Any other questions or thoughts? I think most of you probably already have Julius and my emails, but I put them there just in case. Please send us any emails or questions. You've heard Emily, our TA. you know, provide some support. So just know that there's a lot of support there. If you are interested, or organization might be interested, we're excited to get you connected to whoever might be able to help answer questions. Leslie, like maybe yours even on like that getting the consent from parents, you know, what have other programs been able to do when they might have run into situations like that, you know, conversations or, you know, with that law. So please use this as a resource. You're not going to be an island unto yourself on this. There's a lot of, you know, project implementation meetings that are meeting weekly with our YHTP TA folks that you would be invited to have that support ongoing of getting a program started and implemented. And when you run into questions about billing or what does HUD mean by this, that's what we're here for, is to help support those programs and answer those questions and get you those resources. So any other questions, please let us know. But with that, I will mute myself since I've done a lot of talking today, and just make sure if there's any last minute questions or feedback.
Thank you, Melissa, for putting this together. This was really great.
Excellent job, Melissa. Excellent. Lots of good information.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon and a good week. And
Take
happy
care.
Indigenous Peoples Day.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.